Welcome once again, everybody, and thank you for following up on our podcasts. Um, this time round, as I had introduced this session, we are dealing with environmental issues, and the current meetings that are going on around the world, including the main one, the COP27, which so far it is almost clocking a week, with another week remaining, or some few days close to a week, which will be ending by 18th. Well, I thought that I will probably bring you to speed with the other meetings that are happening. For example, there is the MOP, which is the meeting of parties that deals with the Montreal Protocol. Is a meeting that was in Canada, and so far, like, we are still complaining, there is nothing efficient that comes out of COPs. The Montreal one is at its 37th meeting, and still discussing these protocols. Among the protocols they are discussing is how to consume energy efficiently. Sorry. And also, they're also talking about how to use the methyl bromide, including another proposal on how to curb on the dumping waste from the appliances, like the electron or electrical appliances and stuff, the e-wastes. I remember in Kenya some few years ago, Safaricom was collecting e-wastes from radios, broken phones, broken computers, and other gadgets. And this is part of what is being discussed. We've not even had the government taking such an initiative here in Kenya. I remember we were once in a meeting, I think it was in 2018, at Milimani St. Andrews, with some few members of International Ecumenical Movement Kenyan chapter, and we were trying to discuss while we were preparing a roundtable. We were discussing on the climate crisis, and we were told by one lady who is now reposed in the Lord, may she rest in peace, Madam Wakuraya, and she told us some many years back, Kenya had experienced a lot of ships that were coming from overseas with chemical wastes, and they were looking for an entry for the dumping of the chemical waste and the e-materials. And I think probably the Kenyan government refused for one reason or the other, probably out of pressure from pressure groups like the NGOs and the civil societies, and also the church was active back then, and I want to believe they also took part in this. But believe you me, there has been a lot of dumping that continues, even if it is not the e-waste. Like, for example, even the television that we buy most of the time from the shops, and the mobile phones that we buy and other gadgets, most of them are used. And I think this again brings us to the question of raw deals that Africans have always gotten from the the free market system, because I believe, like in Europe and other developed countries, people rent phones, and they are brand new phones. They are the first users. But these phones, because once you are done in paying the phone, a new phone comes up. They have a way of they don't have the burden of buying. Okay, so they like lease or hire for some time, and smartphones, and they expire after 2 years. These smart gadgets, they have a shelf life of 2 years. So when you're buying a refurbished phone, you are told it's brand new, it's well packaged, and they are sent to Africa, and we don't hire them, we buy them, and so it's another raw deal. Some of the televisions that we buy and home appliances are defective, and these are part of the wastes that we buy, and so Africa has been wasting a lot of resources because of lazy leaders. The presidents that we elect, and the government leaders, and the businessmen and women who import these things, the bureau standards, the laws, including also food that is imported. They are not well checked, and simply because, anyway, there is no good reason. I used to believe that Africans are really hurrying up to catch up with the West in as far as modernity is concerned, bearing in mind that Africa is within her 100 years of independence after colonialism, and the pillage that took place during colonialism catapulted the developed countries. And so I think leaders should have a way of discussing on how the African resources that were pillaged, and the immigration issue, which recently there was a standoff of immigrants, not only from Africa but also from the Middle East. There was a standoff with Italy, and Italy being one of the colonial countries, a developed country, an EU member, a signatory of the UN charters, and also an influencer of the current Western civilization. It was absurd for the new president and the prime minister, and to make even matters worse, a female who is supposed to be caring, who is supposed to understand the home economy, not seem, even if she is part of a coalition government, them refusing at least for the ships to dock in their ports, and the refugees being attended to by good men and women who volunteered to do so. It was absurd, for sure. France felt compelled, and they did a good thing, which again is bringing us to the kind of politicians that we have. I think the whole world should relook at politics, and realize that we don't have a good political system that stands for the people. There are no Italians and Americans and Africans and Asians. All of us are human beings. And one problem that is happening in one place may have been caused by those who living in another place. Like what I began by proposing, that the people who were colonized have a right at least to secure a job at a certain percentage, or the people who colonized other countries have a responsibility of doing a corporate social responsibility by giving back. But there's a lot of misinformation, and I believe even the young generation of the colonial masters or the colonial countries, they don't have the information of colonialism even in their school syllabus. And so for them, they are ignorant, and they may feel that people are coming to steal from them. They don't know that they stole first. And so going back to our MOP, the 34th session that is currently happening, they also talk about the baseline for consumption of hydrofluorocarbons by the developing countries. And this is one of the things that I always say, it's still subjective to the developing countries, because these are decisions that are made on behalf. There's a lot of things that Africans have been made to monkey see and monkey do. And unfortunately, this includes also what we study and what we are forced to believe in religions. I have seen Africans not being, for example, in the Christian society, they've not been taken seriously in terms of witness and how they encounter the Savior. And they've been treated as part of the consumer, the larger consumer, larger consumer market. And sorry, we need to wake up for sure. Let us not be arranged and rearranged, for lack of better word. So for me, that the baseline issue for developing countries on how to consume hydrofluorocarbons, for me, it is very subjective. And even all these international meetings are very subjective towards Africans. And it is something that also happens. During COVID, I saw the Ethiopian SG of the World Health Organization being looked upon by President Trump. And I thought probably, and there was an African being mentioned, that African doesn't know what he's saying. And these things are happening. You look at the security, the UN Security Council, it's the same players. No African representatives, at least in the permanent board. And so it is what it is. Well, there are other meetings that are happening, like for example, the COP27 under the UN FCC, which is discussing on mining, which was one of the major area of pillaging, minerals and metals, and they're talking also about sustainable development, and it is currently happening in Geneva. And so that is the AGM on the Intergovernmental Forum. And also there is another one called the Geo Week. The Geo Week, which observes on the Earth, and it is making projections on for 2025. And there is a working group that is going through all that, and also there are other meetings like the COP14 convention, which is looking at the issue of wetlands. Like, for example, here in Nairobi, we have built houses, a concrete jungle upon wetlands. And because of, like I said, lazy leaders, Nairobi was like the lungs of this country. And I think the first regime after independence ought to have looked at that. Probably they never fathomed a climate crisis like we are experiencing. But the fact that Mombasa and Machakos were not able to make a colonial city because of lack of fresh, clean water, I think that would have been a major driving force for a Kenyan city to be in the Asal region, and all this development ought to be happening in the Asal regions, and leave the wetlands for food production. But then again, for the African and developing countries to be assisted or given loans by the World Bank and IMF, there is a policy that African countries should not produce their own food. And that's why you saw during the Russian and Ukraine war, people have been suffering because food production has been done in Europe. It has been clustered among other countries. Russia produces fertilizer, Ukraine produces grain, and so on and so forth. And for African countries and other developing countries are supposed to produce cash crops, which are supposed to be processed in Europe and North America. And so this is the arrangement and the rearrangement of the developing countries. And I probably think leaders see this, but there's nothing much they can do because they are lazy. They can't mobilize their citizens. I believe Kenya has a capacity within herself for us not to overdo, not to try and catch up with the Europeans, but to live within our means. And we are good at pulling together in the spirit of Harambe, and we are able to do very many things with limited resources. Do something that is satisfying to everybody. But this system of having a few, making it at the top, and then having a cluster whereby you have those at the higher cadre, those at the middle cadre, and those at the bottom of the pyramid who are supposed to be the worker bees or the worker ants. It's a bad system. It's a subjugating system, and it is also a system that does not honor life and does not give dignity to humanity. And so as we continue to follow up, remember to follow us on my social media, Isaac Mirori, YouTube, and all other social medias. And remember also to follow us on our website, www.imonza.org. Thank you. See you on the other side of the break.